When do you need to map subsurface features on a land title survey, and why is that important? When I say subsurface, I mean things that are underground. Before we answer that question, let's just have a quick review. What's a land title survey? It's a special survey that you have performed. It's usually for a lender, so it's when you want to get financing on a piece of property. And the lender and the title insurance company use that survey to negotiate the type of title insurance coverage that's going to be provided by the title company and what exceptions are going to apply to the insurance policy. And the land surveyor has very specific things he or she needs to do to meet the specification for land title surveys. So, when do you need to map underground features on a land title survey? Well, what do we mean by underground features? What kind of things are we talking about? So I'm going to give you 3 examples, quick examples. We're talking about basements under buildings. We're talking about tanks, cisterns, and utility vaults. So kind of underground cavities that aren't a basement. And then finally, we're talking about underground utility lines. That's usually one of those 3 things is what we're talking about when we talk about subsurface features. So let's talk for a minute about the bare bones specification, the minimum specification for a land title survey. There's some things that a surveyor is required to do. So let's talk about when it relates to underground features, what is a surveyor required to do by the spec, whether you want it or not? Okay, so there's 2 things that he might have to do. No matter what, he has to do the first one, and that is he has to survey evidence of surface utilities. So if there's a manhole lid or a valve lid, or maybe there's a utility pedestal or a pipeline marker, something at the surface that indicates there's an underground utility, the surveyor has to survey that and show it on his map. Now, that didn't used to be required. So before 2016, that wasn't required. If a surveyor did a survey, she didn't have to locate utilities, surface utilities, unless she was asked by the client. They changed that in 2016. Now we have to survey all the surface utilities on the subject parcel. So that's required. Now you notice it doesn't say you have to survey surface evidence of other stuff, but of utilities that is required. Now, if the client checks Table A Item 11, which is an optional item, so this isn't required, but if the client checks Table A Item 11 and the surveyor agrees to do it, then they also have to map utilities, underground utilities, from 2 sources, depending on what the client asks for. The first source is record drawings from the utility companies, and the second source is from paint markings or flags from a utility locator. So let me talk about that because I want to make sure you guys understand. So if you're asked, if a surveyor's asked, if you, the client, ask me as a surveyor, I will go to my local utility companies and request their record utility drawings for your parcel. Now, there's a couple problems with that on land title surveys. It can take weeks to get an answer, and usually we don't have that much time on a land title survey because we're trying to get it done before escrow. And secondly, the quality of those record drawings varies greatly and usually is on the crummy side. So as a practical matter, I don't typically get asked as a land surveyor to map utilities from record drawings. It does happen occasionally, but it's not typical. The more likely scenario is you, the client, will hire a utility locator, or you will ask me as a surveyor to hire a utility locator, and we'll have a utility locator go out and they will mark utilities on the site. And they do that with a couple different methods. They could use GPR, ground penetrating radar. They could use electromagnetic location. They could use sound and vibration. There's different ways that they do it. But they'll go out and they'll do their best to find any of the utilities that are underground at the site. That is not magic. It is not bulletproof. I'd say it gets you 80% of the utilities on the site. Most of the time, it depends a lot on the site and the soil conditions and the condition type of utilities. Water lines are notoriously hard to locate, especially plastic water lines, but it'll get you 70 or 80%. So if you ask for that, the surveyor will go out and he will survey those utility marks, and then he will try and use that with the evidence of surface utilities to show you where the underground utilities are. So that's what a surveyor might be required to do. Okay, he's always required to show surface utilities. He may be required, if you ask it in Table A, to map from record drawings from utility companies or to use utility locator marks to identify and locate underground utilities. So Why are subsurface features tricky? Why are they a challenge on land title surveys? I'm going to give you 6 reasons why underground features are tough on land title surveys. Number 1, your surveyor can't see underground. I wish I could. As a surveyor, see underground. I cannot. So that makes it a challenge. Number 2, you don't always have surface evidence of the utility. In many cases you do, but there are cases where you have a pipeline or a sewer line that runs through your property. There's no surface evidence on your parcel. There isn't a manhole. There isn't a pipeline marker. Okay. The third reason is subsurface features, underground features can have a huge impact on the value and use of your parcel. So even though you can't see them, they're really important, and they can make or break a project on occasion. I told a story about a developer that bought a piece of vacant land, and he didn't get a good survey. He didn't locate utilities. He started to excavate the basement of the new building. He broke the neighbor's sewer line. The neighbor couldn't occupy his building for months. There was a lawsuit. Got really expensive. So the stuff that's underground really matters. If you buy a building in downtown Stockton, and most of those buildings in my town have basements, and your basement's 2 feet into the public right-of-way, and the city wants to come in and they want to do street work, you got a problem. You could have an issue there. It could affect the structural integrity of your whole building. So they're hard to see, but they can be really important. Number 4, it's expensive to map subsurface features. So utility locating is often just as expensive as surveying, or more expensive. If you want a building located or some kind of underground vault, I often have to traverse, what we call traverse, survey through the building, above ground building, to get underneath the ground. And that's a challenge, and that's expensive. Number 5, mapping underground features, even though it's expensive, just as expensive as above ground surveying, it's inherently less accurate. So, utility locating, we might get you within a foot or 2 or 3 feet of a utility line, but it's not as accurate as an above ground survey. So things just aren't as accurate. And then finally, 6, if you really need to know where something underground is, the only foolproof way to do that is to do what they call potholing. So they use a vacuum truck or a truck with a water jet on it to excavate the utility, or you got to dig it up. You just get a backhoe in there and a guy with a shovel, and you dig to look at the utility. And oftentimes in construction in urban areas, you actually have to do that, but that's way more expensive than a land survey. So that's depressing, just overall kind of depressing. So do I have any good news? Well, I want to give you some recommendations. So these are my 5 recommendations about locating subsurface features, underground features on land title surveys. Number 1, always have the surveyor request record drawings if you've got time. So if you don't have to close in 2 weeks, and you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, have your surveyor reach out to the local utility company. Some of those plans he may be able to get fairly quickly. So if it's local storm and sewer or water information from your city, a lot of times we can get that in a few days. So ask your surveyor to do it, and just have him do it or have her do it. Just as a rule, that's just a rule of thumb, a good recommendation. Second, ask your surveyor to determine if these maps survey surface features. It's okay to ask your surveyor, if you're not sure what one of those surface features is, to ask your surveyor what his best guess is. So if he's got a vault there, say, hey, do you have any idea what this vault's for? He may be able to go back out to the site and look off-site and figure out what it is that's connecting to that structure. So it's okay. You can ask your surveyor questions. Now, he may reply to you and say, hey, I don't know, I don't want to say, or I can go get some information, but that's an extra cost, and that's okay for your surveyor to say that, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question. And if it's important enough, you may pay for him to go meet with the local utility company, or you may say, hey, now that you've done your survey, we're really worried about that manhole you saw there. We're going to pay for a utility locate. So don't be afraid to talk to your surveyor. That's why you hired him. He's the expert. If you hire the right kind of surveyor, he or she is trying to be an advisor. They're trying to help you get your project goals accomplished. Have a conversation with them if you're not sure about some of the utilities. If you're developing, get utilities located. It's just no brainer. If you're going to be doing construction on the site, especially in an urban area, pay for the utility mark and locate. Get it done before the survey. If you go in and you do the survey, and the surveyor prepares the land title survey, and then later, when you go to do construction or design, you get the utilities marked and located, now it's not showing up on your survey. If you're going to do construction, underground construction, you might as well get those utilities located before you get the survey done. That way your designer's got them. You've got these utilities located survey grade, and that'll help your designer and your contractor. And then finally, always have the surveyor map underground basements near property lines or building setbacks. If you think you've got a basement on a building near a property line or near a building setback, pay the extra cost and have your surveyor get in the building and locate that basement. Or maybe you could use GPR and locate that basement depending on the soil conditions. Don't skip that. If you got a building, it's in the middle of a 50-acre parcel, and your basement's nowhere near a property line, then I'm not saying you need to bear that cost, but if it's near a property line or a setback or an easement line potentially, have your surveyor locate that underground basement on the survey. Okay, so those are my recommendations. So, surveyors can't see underground. Underground stuff is a challenge on land title surveys. Work with a good surveyor. Talk to him, talk to her. Come up with a plan for how you're going to handle the underground stuff. Don't get burned by buying a piece of property and then finding out that something you thought you owned underground is across the property line. It's no bueno.